In this fourth and final installment of the Ted Kuykendall series, we're going to learn more about what he did after the war, his time in occupied Japan, and also we're going to go through a box of his souvenirs that you're not going to want to miss. We're going to make sure this gets posted on YouTube and our website. Please go to either of those to see these amazing relics. Well, speaking of VJ, I mean, where were you when the war was over?
I was still in Portland after they dropped the bomb on the 6th of July or August. I was in Portland still waiting on new construction because like I say, the shipyard had burnt and they was rebuilding, doing a repair on the Bear. Mm-hmm. And so that was in August, and so she didn't go in commission until October. So I was there in Portland, Oregon, till October, and then we made trial runs, and then made one run to Japan. And I spent Christmas Eve in Japan, standing out in front of the Emperor's Palace.
Really? Could you describe that? You were part of the occupation force?
No, I was still on the ship, and once I was just called a train run up to Tokyo and went out to the Emperor's Palace to see what it looked like, and of course it had this big moat around it. But Tokyo at that time looked like a tornado had hit it.
Really?
Because after the firebombing, for several weeks there, the 26s had firebombed Tokyo, and my golly, was not too many buildings standing, what I could see, because they had more wood buildings than they had masonry. But it was a mess.
Wow. What about the people, the Japanese? What condition were they in when you saw them?
I didn't come in any contact with any of them, or a few, but they were, they weren't belligerent type of people. I mean, they were very, actually, I think most of them are very social people.
Mm-hmm. Well, you didn't have a chance to really interact with them too much, but you did see that Tokyo was pretty well devastated.
Oh, yeah, that it was burnt because of firebombing and all.
They told about the women and the shoes. That
Yeah, listen to this.
What, in front of the palace ground.
Yep.
Standing out there in this big parade ground. Rocky, or well, not Rocky, but it was Chat. And these two gals come up there and kicked their sandals off and walked across this gravel parade ground over to the moat. Knelt down and prayed toward the Emperor's Palace or whatnot. And of course, at the time, I thought, wow, that's really stupid. But yet, that whole generation of those people, they'd been taught from childhood up that the Emperor was a divine person. And by the same token, had we had to invade Japan, I don't have any idea what the casualties would have been or anything, but you would have had the whole Japanese nation down there fighting our landing forces, I think, because they were devoted to the Emperor. And that kind of devotion, why a person would give up their life for it, from kids on up. Yeah. And they would have been down there with some fly swatters for you. But so I think that as horrible as the A-bomb was, it stopped a hell of a war. Because there was, nothing in last century has been more people involved in anything than during World War II. It involved more people, more nations, more country worldwide. It was a worldwide war. And as far as I'm concerned, the survivors of that war, thank God for everybody.
Amen.
We've never heard a vet tell us we shouldn't have used the A-bomb. And in fact, towards the end of the Bill Malk series, which is running right now, for those who haven't listened to it, he was old breed Marine who fought in Peleliu and Okinawa. He said something that I'll never forget when you asked him about the A-bomb. He during a lot of the interview, he would kind of look down at his notes. He wouldn't
Right.
make eye contact with you. He lifted up his head and made eye contact with you, the interviewer. And basically, I'm paraphrasing. I can't remember exactly what he said, but basically he said was, you can't understand how important the A-bomb was because your life wasn't on the line. Mine
Yeah.
was. You weren't there. I was there. I was the one that's going to go fight that freaking war. Don't tell me that we shouldn't have used the A-bomb. He literally kind of got generational on us.
He
And
did.
he was right. And I don't disagree with him.
Yeah, he was saying that a lot of people in your generation
Yes.
might doubt the need to have done that.
But you
But
weren't there.
I was there, and it was my life on the line, and I'm happy we did it. I was like,
And I
very
had-
well said.
Dude, and I had never thought of it that way before. I've always thought of it as, I've always agreed we should have dropped it, but I always thought about where we were in history, what were our choices.
Sure,
How much-
the academic reason for it.
Yes. I never thought about, hey, wait a minute, Gen Xer dude who's on the History Channel telling me we didn't need to drop this. You weren't there. Your life wasn't on the line. How can you tell me that we shouldn't have? And what you just heard him say there was here he is. And by the way, audience, this is a very rare thing to have someone who's still with us today. Well, he's not actually.
Right.
To be able to tell you what it was like just weeks after the bomb was dropped, and they had surrendered, to see the devotion was the word he used, how devoted they still were to the emperor.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, for sure. And you're right. Every guy we've spoken to who knew that the next stop was an invasion of Tokyo Bay, they are all very happy that the atom bomb was dropped. And I think we've talked about that. There was a documentary. I got to find that documentary that talks about the reasons for the atomic bomb, and it was very convincing. And there's just a lot of factors that went into it. It was the zeitgeist at the time that you just the fatigue with the war, the fanatic fighting that the Japanese were throwing at us with every step closer to the homeland. Anyway, so we'll move on.
No, but before we move on, okay, trivia time. I looked this up. How many pieces of mail did the USPS deliver in the last year they calculated in 2023? What's your guess, Rhino?
This is for all of the U.S.
Yep, just the USPS. How many letters did they deliver? Now, we knew in 1945 they delivered 2.5 trillion letters. How many did the post office deliver in 2023?
Does this count if you're talking about the junk mail and the stupid ass flyers I get in the mail and all that crap?
I think it does, actually.
Oh,
Yeah,
no.
It's basically pieces of mail.
Oh my gosh. I'm gonna say a billion.
127 billion pieces of mail. Most
Wow,
of it
I'm only
probably
off by
junk.
127. Yeah, most of it's junk. That's right.
So
Wow.
I would say a billion of it was probably actual stuff we cared about, and the other 126
I would say
billion
you're
was
right.
junk. So, at any rate, so we'll move on. Basically, we'll play some of these other clips. It's just him thinking back on World War II, and then we're going to wrap this up with some clips that need to be believed. But go ahead and play the next one, Rhino.
I still think that old Teddy Roosevelt had it right when you speak softly and carry a big stick. I still think you got to be like the Boy Scouts' motto is be prepared. And if this nation is not prepared, I think they had plenty of warnings on this trade center deal. But information is necessary. But it's not worth a darn unless it goes to the right people and they make up their mind to do something. You've got to have the right people making the decisions. And uh, by the same token, who do we know is right today and wrong tomorrow? It's a sort of a toss-up, because as long as mankind's been around, you've had wars and rumor of wars. And I guess you always will have. Of course, on the 7th December of 41, I'll never forget that. And I can't. Lots of things that I can't remember, that I don't remember, that I'd like to forget of other things, but one of those things like that affects you so much that I don't think that anybody could forget it. Because I don't think there had been a day in the last century that happened that affected as many people worldwide as that one day did.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thank God each day that I survived the day.
Boy, you talk about coming close to the sun, flying too close to the sun. I mean, that day he was right there in the thick of it, and he was feet away from death at any given point during that attack and that first wave. And, I was going to ask him, I wasn't there. I would like to have known what transpired in the different waves of the attack. I think there were two waves, or were there three waves? I think there was supposed to be a third wave and it never materialized. But I'm just wondering how, did all of their damage occur in the first wave of the attack, or was it like later in the morning? You're on mute, Tony.
The first wave, it was the torpedo bombers did the most damage, because you had all those battleships lined up, and they were able to some of these battleships took 5, 6, 7 torpedoes, right?
Right.
And then the second wave, actually, no, I take that back. The first wave, they were concentrating on the airfields, and then the torpedo bombers. And then the second wave, they had a lot more of the dive bombers come in. But in terms of which wave did the most damage, I do not know the answer to that. I just know that the first wave, they were really focusing on the aircraft. And then as the day went on, they were focusing on sinking the ships.
I don't know why I'm doing this, but I'm thinking of the choreography of what happened with these tugs moving this ship around in the middle of this battle. And I wonder if they did it in the in the pause between the waves.
Yeah.
The first wave and the second wave. But anyway, that stuff's amazing. I was thinking of something earlier. We were talking about, early on, with Pearl Harbor and the whole conspiracy on whether we knew about it and stuff like that. Anytime there's a major, I guess we'd call it a black swan event that happens, you can be thinking something's going to happen. Everything got all quiet all of a sudden. What's going on here, and I think like with Pearl Harbor, there was a whole number of things there that were obvious intelligence things we missed. We the guy who saw the planes coming in on the radar, and it was dismissed by the guy up the chain of command. And who would think that? Come on, there's nothing going on. It's Sunday morning, and the same with the Battle of the Bulge. There was so many intelligence faux pas that happened there that was like, how could we have missed these things? I mean, you had civilians making their way across the German lines saying, there's a whole bunch of tanks and they're staging over there. Oh, yeah. You're crazy. You're crazy, And I mean, every major, like I will call it a black swan event, even in these wars, I think there's just things that are just unfathomable to our own, the hubris of our mind, thinking, nah, that ain't going to happen. That's crazy. Yeah, they won't ever do that.
Because what you described was neither of those examples that you gave was there lacking in the technology or the intel to be able to know what was going on. It was behavioral psychology that failed us. It was our blind spots. Yeah. And that's a tough thing to guard against. Look at the more recent example in the Ukraine when the Russians were 9/11, but even more recent than that with Ukraine, when the Russians were lining up all kinds of forces and building bridges, and the United States and our intel community was saying the Russians are going to invade, the Russians are going to invade. And the Ukrainians were like, no, they're not going to invade. This is just something. And not just the Ukrainians, but a lot of countries around the globe, most of Europe, China, were like, no, this is a bunch of bull crap. And they invaded. Even we had pictures of them, pictures of Russian troops getting ready to invade, and no one would believe it until it happened. So
Yeah.
I don't think as a species we're anywhere near to being able to outgrow those sort of blind spots because they continue to occur.
I know, and you know, like I said, you know, even all the way through to 9/11, you know, there were lots of the things that could maybe have tipped us off with that and everything. But anyway, I mean, yeah, it's the sort of thing that I fear may always be a problem for us. We're always gonna have a blind side that we just can't see past. You know.
Well,
But,
as Ted said, his philosophy is walk softly and carry a big stick. So
yeah.
he definitely had his dog in the fight, and it was under Teddy Roosevelt's mantra right there.
You know, there's real quick. I just want to say, and I'm not going to get political here. I just thought that this quote was funny. Someone had mentioned recently, just a day or two ago, Teddy Roosevelt, speak softly, carry a big stick, and some people would say that our current president speaks loudly, carries a big stick, but doesn't ever hope to use it.
Right.
You know,
He's that kid in the playground, right?
Yeah.
Taking his stick out and showing everyone.
All right. At least you'll probably move on from that pretty quick. Okay.
Probably. So there's 3 clips left, audience. This next one, gosh, it's a little out of place. Maybe I'll move it around when I do the final editing, but it just talks about the fog of war and some of the issues that we had when attacks like this occur. Okay, your daughter Harriet, is that correct?
Yes.
Mentioned something about a T-shirt. Could you put this?
Boys, well, most of their name stenciled on your skivvy shirt and everything else, and apparently Giles was wearing Bush's shirt or something, because I remember Bush's folks got the notification that he had been killed, and he wasn't, and so it was one of the other guys that had somebody else's T-shirt on.
These guys that you knew?
Okay. In the same division, because we only lost 2 out of our division.
So he's saying that somebody had another guy's shirt on, but he was dead. The guy was lying there dead with the wrong T-shirt on, and they notified the parents, and he was actually, wow.
Yeah, and what he said
Alive.
earlier when he was talking about like VJ mail or V mail was he said there wasn't a lot of mail going out after Pearl Harbor. It was chaos, and so these sort of things happen where the U.S. Navy Department was notified that person that they died when they didn't, before they could even get the mail train caught up, so his son could tell him that they were still alive.
You know, this reminds me of, whenever you and I were running the Wings Over Houston Legends tent for the Wings Over Houston Air Show, and we invited the local Houston chapter of the Pearl Harbor Survivors Association to come out and be a part of the tent there to meet the public, have their own table, and they sent like 4 guys out. One was Louis Legesse. There was this guy named Butsy Vaughn, which was such a cool name for, and there was like 4 of these guys, and they all gave me copies of some of the stuff. They had like the menu on the Arizona that from that day, which wasn't real, it was a photocopy. But I've got some of their materials. Maybe what we can do is when we actually put this out, we can put it on our website to be associated with this story, because I'm not sure how many more actual Pearl Harbor vets we have in our library, and maybe we can throw some of that extra information we have up on our website that has some real, as you would say, historicity.
Yeah. So in fact, let's skip clip 21
Okay.
and go right to 22, and let's talk about artifacts. Well, there's some other things I would mind having you explain. Let me zoom out a little bit. And I'm actually going to take the camera off. And if you could just hold this up and just explain what each of these are real quick.
This was the
Wait, Daddy, he's gonna start it.
There we go. Okay, go ahead.
this is the watch list for the E Division for the 6th and 7th of December 1941.
Look at that
Oh
yellow
my
paper.
gosh.
Yeah.
This was hanging on the
Look at the date.
power shop.
There's Giles' name. Giles' name is on there.
I pulled it off the shop. I don't know. Hang on to it.
How did he get?
I was here on security patrol from midnight to 4. And I've just hung on to that. Of
Giles
course,
is the guy that
the
died.
longer I keep it, the more it can it means to me, because it doesn't mean to a lot to anybody else, but
that's actually was
There's
hanging
more.
on the door in the
hanging
Nevada.
the bulletin board there in the power shop on the old Nevada. So
That's amazing. And the other thing that you have here is, well, I'll let you explain it. What is
that is the name tag actually off the after distribution board.
really?
Because and that
Oh my
well
gosh.
was
Yeah.
stripping the ship and everything, and I don't know. I hung on to that thing, and I guess I shouldn't have hung on to some of that stuff, but
I think it's good that you did actually.
Oh, I'm
This is
happy you
pretty
did.
it's
interesting.
just, of course, there's a lot of it is just nothing but junk. You know, I mean,
You know what they say about one man's junk.
one man's junk's another man's treasure.
Yeah. And lastly,
Yeah, he's
we've
not
got
done.
some interesting artifacts here. Could you
Oh, what?
describe what do you got in this?
Oh,
this
golly,
blue
let's see.
box?
Oh, let's see. Oh, that's just a piece of shrapnel that picked up off the ship, and
Probably from the USS Shaw.
there's a rivet head that popped loose. The way that when that popped loose and flew, that's just like a rivet or a head.
Just like a bullet flying through the
Yeah.
air.
Wow.
There's
Yeah.
there's another piece of looks like an old bomb or something. That's
It
part
does.
of the shrapnel. So it
Yeah.
made some pretty. I don't know. I picked it up, and then there was a piece of a
Japanese
little
plane.
piece of plane that we over on the
What?
cane field that I tore off or something.
It's got some red paint on it, does it not?
Yeah, it's got the red paint on it there, and that. I don't know whether that was part of the.
Bullet hole.
No, it wasn't part of it. It was a part of the red dot on the plane.
Yeah.
And then there was some old Japanese machine gun bullets. It was
Dang.
Taken out of the wing.
there was one of the planes that was shot down in the cane field there.
Wow. So that was something that you were able to.
And I just picked it up and hung on to it as sort of a souvenir thing.
Well, I think it's great. I just want to get that on tape. And again, I really am today in discussing
Oh,
this
my
with you.
golly. Been nice having you.
All right.
You want a Coke or Dr. Pepper?
Dude, so here's what I did. I looked up. There are sites devoted to finding the crashed airplanes that from Pearl Harbor, and it turns out that the Japanese lost 29 airplanes during the attack. 9 of which were Japanese Zeros, and I think 17 of them. I had it written down here somewhere. Now I can't find it. But the bottom line is there were these planes that were all over the place, and one of them, which was a Val dive bomber, crashed in the cane field near the Arvada, and that may be the piece of wing that he took off, and the machine guns from that Val dive bomber, and there's more. Here is a I got it right here. Here it is. So this is a firsthand account. So as these planes crashed, terrible things happen. People don't think about these 29 planes that crashed all over Hawaii. And here's one that was documented. It was piloted by Takashi Hirano, Hirano. He was flying his Akagi aircraft carrier based Zero. And what happened, according to this document, which is from jaircraft.com on research, this is unbelievable. So this is a little snapshot into what happened to some of these Japanese planes, how they get shot down, how are they even there for people like Ted to souvenir from. Here's what it writes. It said that Hirano, flying his Zero, would have felt his belly tank striking the ground while strafing Hickam Field and then being ripped off. So he was trying to strafe the field, and then the belly tank ripped off. He would have felt the impact of the propeller blades digging into the runway surface. Out of balance and bent, the propeller blades would have induced a severe vibration of the engine and damaged the engine mounts. Hirano must have struggled to remain airborne a few feet off the ground as he headed west in a southerly direction towards Fort Kamehameha. Passing some of the officer quarters to his right, on the verge of stall, Hirano struck two coconut palms in front of Fort Kamehameha Ordnance Machine Shop, and a group of soldiers from Sea Battery, 41st Coast Artillery Regiment, had gathered on the ramp of the shop. When it hit the palm tree, the engine and forward fuselage went in one direction, and the other part of the plane went into another direction. And here's what happened. This is an eyewitness account from a colonel who saw this. He wrote, "It wasn't until I heard the bombing and the explosions and the tat-tat-tat of the machine guns that I knew what it was. It was 7:45, so they were going after the aircraft. My reaction was, it's a funny time for the Air Corps to start trouble." As he proceeded to the battery to go see what was going on en route of the Hirano crash, this is what he saw. He said, and he quotes, "A Japanese plane had struck a coconut tree, caromed off the first tree, struck into the wall at my right at the ordnance machine shop shed. The plane was on the ground. The pilot was dead. He was stuffed in the plane, in the tree. The engine had gone around the ordnance shop, and in caroming off the engine struck several men who were in the road. One man was decapitated. The
Oh
other
my
man
gosh.
apparently had been hit by the prop because his legs and arms and head were off, lying in the grass, and the pilot was dead." So the reason I shared this gruesome tale is they try to take you back into how some of these Japanese pilots, how they crashed, how they died, and then all the additional damage that occurs, just all the random ways to die in a war. They have
Well,
a
yeah,
Japanese plane fly through go
yeah.
right into Hickam, hit its belly tank on the deck, have it ripped off, hit its propellers on the deck, fly in a coconut tree, hit a bunch of men who were by this machine shop, and killing them all.
My gosh.
And this was
Yeah.
happening all over the island. And the other thing that this thing talks about, this website, is they show a bunch of these planes, and they all talk about how the United States, the MPs, tried to cordon off these areas because they wanted to bring these planes into the hangar so they could study them to find out the capabilities of these
Yeah.
aircraft. But they mentioned in this article that none of the MPs could stop the souveniring from going on because these guys knew it was a historical event, and a lot of them were around the island picking up these pieces, which is exactly what Ted did.
Well, and I would have done the same thing.
Same here. Absolutely. And I'm glad
And-
he did.
There's a pretty famous photo of a civilian car that was strafed by Japanese Zero, and the occupants are lying dead inside the car. And it was a man in a business suit and a woman, and it was like, it's like, and then that's when it hits home. Like, this was not just a isolated military thing. There was a lot of collateral damage, that happened with this. And wow.
Yeah, totally. And just the last thing that I want to read briefly is Ted's obituary. So I interviewed Ted on October 26th, 2007. 2 months and a day later, on December 27th, 2007, he died.
Oh my gosh. I didn't realize it was that quick.
Yeah. It was, I remember I interviewed him, and he sounded fine.
Yeah.
Right, full of life, doing stuff. I didn't know if he was sick or anything. And I remember bringing my kids to one of the Pearl Harbor Survivor Association breakfast things, and that's when they announced that he had just died.
Oh,
It's like,
no.
my. So on one hand, I'm very grateful that we had a chance to sit down with him and his daughter Harriet and record this amazing story, this amazing history. On the other, this happens way too often where we interview somebody, or we want to interview somebody, and then they pass away before we get a chance to do it. But his obituary reads briefly, Ted was born in Oklahoma, the son of George Ebba Kuykendall, who passed away in 1965, and his mom, Orpha Bell Kuykendall. He graduated in Stroud in 1939, joined the Navy in 1940, was sent to Pearl Harbor, where he boarded the USS Nevada in June of 1940 as a seaman second class. On December 7th, 1941, he was working the starboard boat crane, remember the crane,
Yeah.
when he saw Japanese planes attack. The Nevada was hit with a torpedo. As Kuykendall was trying to close the ship's watertight doors, a bomb hit the galley and threw him across the apartment. 40 years later, he discovered that he had shrapnel in his hand from that attack.
Ah.
Yeah, we actually have that clip. We can play it if you want, but it talks about the shrapnel may have been paint. That paint was a major hazard on these ships. It was so thick it would fly everywhere. It speaks about him being discharged from the service. He worked for the Grand River Dam Authority and then the Southwestern Power Administration. And he is survived by his 2 children, Harriet, who I met of Tulsa, and George of Kelowna, Iowa, who I did not have a chance to meet. And so
Wow.
just wanted to let our audience know that he was very gracious. He offered me a Dr. Pepper.
Yeah, I heard that. That's awesome.
Which I took him up on, and we had a chance to talk some more. I had no idea that day when I interviewed him that 2 months and a day later, he would no longer be with us.
Oh my gosh. Well, and you thank God that we had the opportunity to document these stories, for guys like this that we're not going to be around much longer. And it's great. It's just so awesome for the family to have these sorts of things, as a memento. But great stuff, man.
And then what I'll try to do is I'll see if I got Harriet's phone number. I don't know if it's still valid or not. I'll see if she's still available. And when we drop this series, I'll let her and her brother know. But yeah, that wraps this up, Rhino. He took us on quite a journey. He was there for a very historic event and then traveled on a floating bomb for the rest of the war. Had a chance to visit Tokyo and see the devotion that they had towards the emperor and be thankful that we had the atom bomb, and then had a full life. He was 86 years old when he passed away and seemed to, be really close with his family. And I'm very privileged that I had a chance to talk and meet with him that day.
Well, great stuff, Tony. We've got other guys that are like kind of ancillary stories. We've got the Marine Corps guy that we interviewed together that was at Pearl Harbor in a Marine tent.
Yep.
And his tent was strafed. I mean, we got some little sidebar stories here and there and everything, and we'll be digging some of those out because there's some really cool little vignettes here and there on Pearl Harbor that we do have. Mm-hmm. So anyway, well, good stuff, Tony. Thanks for sharing that. Thanks for going through all the work of cutting up the clips and everything. If you guys, please tell your friends all about our podcast here and everything. We sure like to hear from you guys also. So we'll just kind of sign off here. My name is Ryan Fairfield.
And I'm Tony Lupo.
And we will catch you next time. You got half of it. You got half of it.
Recorded this time?
All right. Half of it did. Yeah, okay.
We hope you enjoyed the Ted Kuykendall series as much as we enjoyed getting to hang out with Ted so many years ago in his house with his daughter Harriet. To hear Ted talk about these amazing experiences he had, and also some of the artifacts that he brought back from the war. Just another reminder, we're going to make sure that the YouTube clips that show these artifacts that are featured in this last episode, this final episode, episode 4, will be available on our website, thewarriornextdoor.com, and our YouTube channel of the same name. So feel free to check us out on Facebook, our website, our YouTube, especially for this series where you have a chance to see a piece of a Japanese bomber or some shrapnel that fell on the deck of the USS Nevada. So, at any rate, until next week,